Alrighty, folks, welcome to the fourth installation of the Left, the Right, and the Absurd. Tonight we are going to be cutting things down a little bit so that we can get people a little bit more interested. So tonight we're only going to be discussing two topics, which we're going to be starting with the draft and then moving on to a more recent topic. We're going to be discussing the idea of, that Obama just recently announced of boots on the ground in Syria. So, to start it off tonight, we want to get things going with a bang, so I'm just going to start it here with the opinions on the draft. Personally, I would do everything in my power to avoid being drafted. I would dodge fake medical issues, and if so necessary, I would be willing to serve the prison sentence. So much so as I dislike the idea of prison, I would not be willing to fight for something I do not support.
Yeah,
There is my personal view on
I
it.
would agree because when it came to like Vietnam and stuff, my grandfather he got drafted, and it was, from what he's told me, it was one of the worst experiences in his life. And me personally, I don't want to go through what he had to go through, especially with updated combat stuff, and it's just not something I want to do. I'd probably dodge other shit like that.
Yeah, fuck that. Fuck being thrown into a war zone where you get to see your friends and shit die. Like, how awful is that? Like, you can't get people to fucking support something enough, so you gotta put a gun to their head and say, go fight and die, otherwise go to prison.
I mean, that's one hell of a form of protest, is being thrown in prison for not wanting to fight.
Yeah, fuck
And
yeah.
I
I'd go
think-
to
Pretty
prison, I'd
noble,
burn
in my
my
opinion.
draft card, I'd move, like, whatever I gotta do, man. I'm not going to fucking kill strangers that I never would have otherwise met halfway across the world for
I
fucking
think
people.
another great example would be, oh god, I forgot his name. Nelson Mandela serving his prison sentence.
No, yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, though, I'm not going to go and fight in some pointless war, like Eric said, halfway across the fucking world in a country that most people haven't even fucking heard of before. And the thing about the United States is we lead the world in three things, which is military spending, citizens incarcerated per capita, and citizens killed by police. I think it's very difficult to call yourself the land of the free when those are the three things you lead the world in.
yeah.
Can we talk about just for
I
a
think
second
when it
about,
comes to-
regardless of whether or not being drafted is fun, where is the state ever given legitimate grounds to stand on when saying, come fight for this cause?
For the
Where is their authority made legitimate? And when it comes down to it, it's only really made legitimate through voting.
I think
Regardless of whether or not you vote for somebody, when they're in office, they're still representing an entire nation. And now we've got the political evolution. When authority is not devolved to the smallest point, which is the individual, then there is room for conflict to arise, because everyone's will isn't just going to disappear. People don't just lose the ability to function as individuals because the government tells them to do something.
Right. I think that's one of the things that we say does not make government legitimate, is that a group of people or individuals doesn't have the right to go up to somebody and initiate force. But all of a sudden, you get a group of people together, and you call yourselves a government, and suddenly that's legitimized. And I think that's absolutely false.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of an appeal to majority fallacy, like, than anything else. You're just saying because these X amount of people that happen to be in the majority have decided that this is good or something worth doing, that it's somehow justified or legitimized, which is absolute horseshit.
Isn't there a old adage from one of the founding fathers about how when a single person does it, it's considered a crime, but when the government itself does it, it's considered justified?
That's a
That's been
Maxter
said
quote.
by a bunch of people. One I remember is Rothbard. It's like, The state calls the actions of the individual a crime and the actions of itself law or something
I thought that
along
was
those
Sterner.
lines.
He's probably
It
said
might have
something like
been.
that too.
I get quotes confused, so I just know the quotes. I don't know who said them.
The other thing, I mean, this isn't just strictly an anarchist thing. I think this really applies to anarchists as well, or as most people would consider them, American libertarians. And it would be, the draft would be considered to some unconstitutional. I mean, it's really, where is the freedom in being told, fight this war or go to fucking prison?
No, and that's the entire point. That's what the fucking state does. They're just like, here, do our shit. Otherwise, we'll do bad things to you. Like, that's just how they operate. So there's absolutely no freedom in that at all.
And
The
Patrick,
state creates conflict in foreign countries and then brews more when it wants you to go fight for everything that they're fighting for, which really isn't relevant to the people. It's relevant to the people who want to make money off of it, and that's a very, very small percentage of people.
The military-industrial complex.
Right.
Was somebody going to say something to me?
Yeah, I was going to say, you wanted to say something about, I think, the draft and the size of the military. You're going to make an argument even to an anarchist.
Yeah, so I think it's an argument that's probably been made before, but it was basically along the lines of a freedom-minded candidate that is completely anti-war and actually wants to shrink the military would make our jobs as anarchists much easier, because if we are going to have a violent revolution, and violent revolution is the only way to actually get rid of the state, then it's going to be very difficult to actually defeat that government that has a large army versus one that has a small one. So for that reason, I think that if we actually get an anti-war and a candidate that's trying to shrink the size of the military, that may be something that we may want to support.
See, the issue I see with that, though, while I can see your point, the issue I hold with it is the fact that to support a candidate just on the sole fact that he is anti-war, there's a multitude. I mean, Rand Paul really would be the best example because people consider him to be the most anti-war candidate of the bunch. Well, that in actuality, that's not true.
There's a bunch of other things that go along with it. That's just one stance that they hold.
Exactly, and to support that candidate just on their anti-war standpoint is to go against every other facet of anarchism itself and to support the state in our eyes. So, while it would be beneficial, it would also be detrimental to our cause. And
that, I don't really see that, though. How would it be detrimental if the only thing that it's doing is making your job easier?
Well, wouldn't it kind of make you look like a hypocrite?
It also, well, I don't know.
I want to jump in on that.
In the eyes
because,
of the public.
People have always
If you're
said
an
that
anarchist
anarchism...
and you continue to vote, it kind of still perpetuates the state and makes it think that, oh, this anarchist is voting for it, so it must be legitimate to some degree.
Well, I wanted to jump in and talk about that because people have always said, well, oh, you can't vote because you're an anarchist, or you can't do this because you're an anarchist, and it's not logically consistent. Fuck that noise, dude. Like, I'm here to get rid of the state. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what is required. They don't play fair, and neither do we. So I don't think that
legislation.
No, I don't think it will be either. Like, I'm under no illusion that fucking voting for someone is going to destroy the state. On a national level, but I mean, if you could get someone in a state position, at a state level, that's or a local level, that's going to get into a position and maybe abolish the office if that's within their power and they're elected, and then there's no more office of whatever the fuck that they had jurisdiction over, I don't see a problem with that. It's unlikely and it's not going to happen in enough cases to make a big difference, but I think that's legitimate.
The only time you would ever use the state is when you can use it to destroy the state.
Which is very, very rare.
Yeah,
that's not voting.
Along the lines of,
No. From
Me and
my
Adam-
perspective, Cole, can I talk about political nihilism for a sec?
yeah, go for it.
All right, from the perspective of a political nihilist, authority does not exist. When it is existent, it is only existent in the mind. It's a perceived material abstraction, and the only way to make something that doesn't exist or have leverage on the material world, then you, as an individual, have to willfully act in a manner that will bring about some kind of authority or bring about morality or worth, anything like that.
And
you have to make a decision. And
but the thing is,
voting as a decision, it's a willful decision. It's not just like signing a piece of paper and fucking throwing it at people who want to count it. As a voter, you are recognizing that you hold all of your political autonomy, whether or not you're thinking about that in your head as you're doing it or not. And by voting, you are giving that away. You're saying, okay, somebody else solve problem X for me, or somebody else do something for me.
Right. If you're a regular voter and you're acting in a way to further propagate the state on to other people through like the drug war or a draft in this instance, then yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily wrong to
Right.
want other people's help for something that you can't do on your own. I mean, obviously, I think voting, we can all agree, is quote-unquote wrong, or we wouldn't do it, but asking others for your help, I don't think is bad.
especially if they're better at doing something, it's an individual action than you are.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I'm thinking.
But
Because, I think it's one of the tenets of capitalism, I guess, and this probably is mutualist as well, and probably even communist and socialist if you're going to take it from a Marxist perspective. But it's, some people are inherently better at doing some things than others are, and if you exchange your labor for their labor, everybody's better off.
Well, the thing I see is what we're really discussing here is the differences between allowing the state and allowing the individual. There's a difference between allowing the state to say, hey, you have to do X because Y, between allowing, say, the plumber to come in and say, hey, I need to unclog your drains because it's flooding your fucking toilet.
Right.
You're not going to sit here and ask the plumber to come and tell you what something about electricity.
Yeah.
The issue with the state is the state overreaches and puts its hands into every single thing,
Right.
while the individual puts itself into the field, what I would say their niche.
Yeah, the anarchist isn't opposed to the authority of the bootmaker, I think, as Bakunin said.
Yeah, what was it? The
Bakunin said,
Bootmaker has no political leverage over you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something about deferring to the authority of the bootmaker. I know what you're
the
talking
old
about.
socialist thought was it's not the fight against hierarchy, but the fight against unjustified.
Hierarchy.
Yes.
Hierarchy essentially has to prove itself to be legitimate. Like, authority isn't self-justifying. It needs to prove itself. And if it
That's
can't
not
meet that
doable.
burden of proof, then it should be dismantled.
Well, I think that's the big problem with the state that we have now is because so many people are apathetic or uneducated or both, the state is legitimized. People say, oh, well, if we have no government, people are going to riot in the streets and everyone's going to get eaten by everyone else. It's going to be awful. Not realizing, of course, that the state
It's going to be anarchy.
Moods.
so they don't understand that without a state, things actually could probably be better.
And they use the same justification for shit like a draft. They're like, oh, hey, look, these scary brown people are going to kill us unless you go fight and die in this foreign country that you've never heard of.
Yeah, we've talked about it last week. The last known situation of boots on the ground in the U.S. was what, the War of 1812?
Yeah, something like that. So I mean, yeah, like that notion that like America is going to be invaded is just absolute horseshit.
Right.
And
this is our challenge as anarchists. Right? Our challenge as anarchists is A, to get rid of the state, but it's B, also to educate people that the state is not necessary to have a civilized society.
Also, just a quick update. We're at 15-minute mark.
And
Cool.
that,
So we should probably transition here in a minute to boots on the ground in
I found
Syria.
the quote from Buchanan. Does it follow that I reject all authority? Perish the thought. In the matter of boots, I refer to the authority of the bootmaker.
Right.
That's what it is.
and what shit.
Are we going to transition to Syria?
Yeah.
We will in just a second. I had something to say and I completely lost it.
Anybody else got anything while he's thinking? Keep things going.
Fuck the draft.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. For along with the draft, I wanted to bring up Ron Kovic from he got drafted on, and it basically ruined his entire life because he got paralyzed because he got shot.
Well, and that's one of the things I did want to bring up from I brought this up before, but personal family experience, I've seen what these things can do to people.
Yeah.
My uncle did, I think, 4 or 5 tours in Iraq,
Jesus.
and to this day, he's in a motorcycle gang now, and to this day, the only thing he thinks he's good at is harming or killing people. And then my father enlisted in the National Guard right before Syria, right before Katrina hit, and as opposed to the thought in most situations overseas, the consensus with them that he told me was that I don't know what it is, COs, the commanding officers, said if you see someone looting food, water, something like that, don't shoot. If you see someone taking something like a TV, shoot on sight.
Jesus Christ.
And I mean that really adheres to the idea of shoot first, ask questions later with the whole TV, like looting unnecessary goods situation. But
So I think to conclude on the draft, fuck the draft, fuck
Yeah.
war, fuck
that,
the government, and fuck anyone who thinks that we need any of those 3 things.
that about sums it up.
Yeah.
I mean, our whole intention here is to tell people, and I know our audience isn't very broad right now, but hopefully we intend to gain more people that wish to learn more about this. And the whole point we're trying to raise here and educate people on is the fact that we have the capability to survive without government. Government is merely a bunch of people just like us that tell us what to do.
Yeah.
It's
And
no
that's wrong.
longer a system of listening to us and helping us. It's become a system of as
Control. It's not about control. It's not about helping. It's about control.
As
Right.
Mussolini put it, it's a conglomeration of state and corporate power. And in actuality, what we have currently is, by
Fascism.
Mussolini's definition, fascism.
Yep.
And the idea that we propagate that people still need these group of what were lawyers and law students and business students and stuff like that, that they have any sort of special credentials that put them above us is just,
Absurd.
yeah.
The title of our show. But I
And
think you raise an excellent point. I think it actually transitions really well into the Syrian conflict in that these individuals tell us one thing and then do the exact opposite.
to start off the Syrian conflict, I want to raise up a few points. What we are doing currently, what President Obama and obviously the House of Representatives and Senate support, is sending 50 special ops trained people to train forces in Syria to combat not only ISIL but rebel troops as
Yeah.
well.
Advise, quote unquote.
But what we don't cover on top of that is all of the backdoor private military corporations, or PMC, that are going to be sent there. Companies like Blackwater and stuff like that are private military contractors. They send out their troops on politicians' dollars, supported by politicians that make money off of them, to train forces similar to what we've done in Iraq, Afghanistan, and numerous other countries in the Middle East. Osama bin Laden is one of the prime examples, who was CIA trained back in the 80s. People that formed Al-Qaeda met with President Reagan and were labeled heroes for combating Soviet communists. Communists in air quotes, obviously.
Yeah.
But we're sitting here perpetuating this ideal that we need to sit here and train these troops, while on top of that we intend to make this part of a multi-level plot to not only send troops, but send weapons, aircrafts, and stuff like that to these countries, when we've already seen sending support to countries like Iraq and Afghanistan falls into the wrong hands.
And then here's the thing, like,
Corruption in the government itself leads to these things. We take Iraq in early 2014. We had 300 troops there. September 2014, we moved all the way up to 1,500 troops, and today we now have 3,500 troops. Now we're discussing the idea of not only sending more troops to Iraq, but also reinstating more troops in Afghanistan than are already sitting there wondering when they're coming home, as they were promised in 2008. We're sitting here listening to these politicians that promise these things. It's been 8 years now that we got promised that these troops are going to get pulled out of Iraq and Afghanistan, yet we're still believing these politicians that they're going to pull these people out.
I don't think I believe any of them when they say that, because it's absolute bullshit.
Like, are we naive enough to, because the original thing was we're not going to get involved in Syria. Then it's, okay, it's just going to be airstrikes, not boots on the ground. And then here we are, just a few months later, it's happening. Are we really going to, believe that this is going to escalate further?
There's absolutely no reason to believe to these people whenever they fucking tell you anything foreign policy related, because they'll lie to you about how many they killed in Vietnam, in Iraq, and Afghanistan, what they plan to do in those places. Like, they've lied about foreign policy since the first fucking country they put boots on the ground in. Like, they will never tell you the truth about what's going on.
And that's the thing. We still have boots on the ground in every single country that we have ever invaded, fought back against, or had any sort of situation happen with them.
Right.
Their bottom line isn't honesty. It's about profit. Yeah,
it's just furthering the military-industrial complex. But on top of that, we've got politicians, like during the Bush administration, at the end of his second term, we've got politicians running for their campaigns, preaching their anti-war policies like Obama. And then now, Obama's second term, election season's coming up now, and we've got people like Trump, Rand Paul, and other politicians like that preaching their anti-war policies and discussing their disdain for the policies that Obama is about to put in action. The same exact situation that Obama stated for Bush. And we're still sitting here.
I don't know if you saw the 2000 presidential debates whenever Bush was talking about that. He was saying all this anti-war shit too. He was like, no, we shouldn't be the world's police, and no, we shouldn't engage in nation building, and no, we shouldn't have boots on the ground in these places, and no, full-scale invasion should not be a thing that America is involved in. All those fucking things happened under his presidency. So, I mean, like, whenever a candidate says that they're anti-war and that they're going to avoid doing all these awful things that get us bogged down in these nations for decades, it's bullshit. Like, it's straight lies.
I think that's a good point, Eric, but I fucking hate Bush, don't get me wrong. I think the 9/11 attacks, the public outcry for action overseas was such that he had to take action. Well, obviously that's deplorable. That was a situation. But I think that's a good point, that whenever a politician tells you, oh, well, I'm anti-war and we're going to pull all the troops out, I am very, very skeptical. when someone says that, because inevitably they are all the same, and they all will perpetuate the conflicts that we have in the region and around the world.
But could we
So-
not say that we can look at the idea of false flag patriotism as well, though? That's one of the major things.
Yep.
And
I guess
I feel we should save this for another discussion. The
Yeah.
idea of
Yeah, let's circle back to Syria.
what
But I'm just saying, when it comes to Syria, they're calling other groups
Well-
terrorists that aren't really, they're fighting against ISIS and things like that, like the YPG and PKK.
And what's weird is that the United States, well, the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, and the Kurds, while they're not technically, buddy-buddy with each other, but they will work together against ISIS and against Assad's regime.
Right.
not
the
just
interesting thing with
Kurds-
Syria is that you have America and Russia in the same territory with conflicting interests. Russia wants to keep Assad in power, and the United States does not. And they're both bombing the same territory and arming and funding different people for different
And what's
purposes.
sad is
and that's
that
kind
that
of a
drives-
bad thing.
That drives a lot of people to support Putin and support Russia, just because they're anti-American.
Right.
In reality, Russia's not. It's just as bad as the United States in its imperialism.
just as
Right.
imperialistic.
Yeah,
other thing I want-
that conflict is not going to be solved with militarism. It's like no conflict in the Middle East is going to get resolved that way. It's just not how the things pan out over there. Like sending ground
Well-
troops in to have an invasion just doesn't fucking work.
And that's the other thing. The whole idea of sending ground troops to Syria is under the guise of diplomacy. That training these rebel groups and training these people is going to, in fact, instill some sort of fear in ISIL that will issue some sense of diplomacy in ending this situation, when in actuality, it's just furthering the military-industrial complex. We've got groups like the YPG and the Lebanese communists who are actually succeeding in pushing back ISIL. And to explain very quickly, for those that don't know, ISIL is the name for the terrorist group ISIS as of now. The original name was the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which was ISIS, but the now stated point is ISIL, due to the fact that they're no longer strictly focusing on Iraq and Syria. They're now focusing on the entirety of the Levant, which is where the L comes from, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant.
If you want to explain what the Levant is.
To my knowledge, it's most of the Middle East, but I may be wrong.
Like the biblical, basically like the biblical Holy Land, so it stretches from all the way from Israel to all the way to the borders of Iran and into Saudi Arabia as well.
But a lot of the thing, we have to raise a point here, and I'm kind of nervous to bring this up as this is an educational channel, and I feel like some people may dismiss this due to the ideas behind it, but the conspiracies behind it, that ISIL was actually trained by the Mossad. I mean, if we look at anything, they've been attacking most of the Middle East, but they've focused little, if nothing at all, on Palestine or Israel.
I
We're
think
at 28 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay, I think the point needs to be made here, though, and I hate to do this, but I think there absolutely is a religious and a cultural aspect of this that a lot of people try to shy away from.
I agree.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, ISIL is an Islamic group, right? And obviously, it's a perversion of the Islamic, Islamic text and religion itself. But what they're saying is hey, we're an Islamic group that wants to take over this area for Islam and for Allah and for our religion.
And to establish a caliphate.
Right.
But in actuality, if you look at any of the pictures of ISIL, one of the main tenets of the Islamic faith is prayer 5 times a day, and you pray towards Mecca.
Right.
But if you've ever really paid attention to any of the time periods in which Islamic believer is supposed to pray, if you've paid any attention to any of the ISIL photos, you'll notice that most of them aren't even the same descent.
Right.
But B, most of them don't even know which direction Mecca is.
Right. Well,
Which
and
I think is an extremely important point here. While we sit here and act like they're trying to establish some Islamic caliphate,
which I think they are.
it's in actuality some sense. Technically, they could be considered to be establishing it, but in actuality, how many people actually know much about the Islamic faith?
Unless you're
One of the
Islamic,
one
not
of the
many people.
greatest things that I recently learned was the story of Cain and Abel. The story of Cain and Abel was not only a biblical text. It was also written in the Quran and actually differentiated from the biblical text, and it was meant to be written as an allegorical story against murder. The Bible really warps that, and it doesn't focus on the actual slaying of Cain or the slaying of Abel, what was considered the first murder.
Right.
And the Islamic faith has always used the story of Cain and Abel as a means of stating, do not kill. And on top of that, many people, since the 9/11 attack, there's been an explosive growth of Islamophobia. And there's no denying that. Me, personally, I don't believe in any faith. I find interest in learning about them all, but I don't support any single faith. I think they're all allegorical stories meant to teach people about the ideas of right and wrong, or to move them in a path towards the idea of what right and wrong should be. While we should all establish that for ourselves, and while morality is subjective, I think it's a means of steering humanity towards a path of a collective idea of morality.
All right, we're running out of time.
Well, I think we can hit on morality next week. That's probably a good place to start.
Morality would be a great place.
Cole, can I hit a quick point in response to you before we end the show?
Go ahead.
So I think that your argument, for religion, I think is a very interesting one, because obviously you're trying to establish that ideal of morality. But I think the brutal reality of especially the Middle East and the ISIL situation is that religion has been perverted, so that it is okay to be violent, it is okay to commit murder and to rape and to behead. And this brutal reality is something that you can't ignore just by saying, well, the religion itself doesn't really teach that, because it is.
Christianity says a lot of fucked up shit in the Bible too. Like, Islam's going through its Reformation period, and eventually
alone in this. It absolutely isn't. But I think that the Christian, the Crusades really were kind of the end of the Christian barbarism, I guess, in the same way, because you didn't have them beheading people currently the way that versions of Islam.
I can see something in that, but at the same time, I can't.
And we should definitely discuss this next week.
Yeah, definitely.
I think this is a good thing to talk about next week.
I think we should, but I just want to touch on this one point. That
Go ahead.
the issue with religion is it's similar to the idea of anarchy. A lot of the true religious aspects that are meant, they're theory. They haven't been ever touched on, and so much like that. Every religion has its fault, and there's no escaping that. Even Buddhists have their faults. If you look into the stories of places like Myanmar and stuff like that, where Myanmar actually has a major issue with Islamophobia as well. The Buddhists there actually have stoned, killed, and slaughtered innocent Muslims.
There's no doubt that they're in the wrong there, yeah.
But the Christian faith and the Islamic faith and the Buddhist faith and all of these faiths are not free from extremists. But that's the exact point. What these people are is extremists of the religion that adhere to the dead tenets of it. Like, for Christianity, it's the people that adhere to the Old Testament. even though the whole point of Christ was to bring about the New Testament and to dismantle the Old Testament.
Right, and to let people have eternal
So many
life.
groups of people that stray from the actual faith themselves.
Right.
And
I think that's a
I
good place.
think we should touch on this in a separate episode, but I just
Yep.
wanted to really clarify that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But for those of you that did tune in tonight, we thank you very much, and we would love it if you would like and subscribe and spread this video. The greater support we have, the more we can produce. We're hoping to get this up to more than just once a week, but we really want to wait until we get things all figured out and set up for you guys. So when you tune in, we are ready.
Also, I would like
So
leave a
to
comment.
everyone who's
Tell us what you think of the new half-an-hour ordeal.
Yeah, let us know if that piqued your interest a little more, you stayed and watched a little longer. If not, then let us know in the comments.
And we'll go back to the 1 hour if you guys don't want that. So let us know. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. We appreciate it.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
And to those who did tune in, we thank you very much. To those who didn't, tell your friends about us. It really helps.
Peace out.